not you are playing the Elgar Violin Concerto like me, or you are just starting out to play the Vivaldi A minor Concerto in Suzuki Book 4, shifting is something you're gonna have to learn how to do if you want to play really any interesting violin music, and you might as well learn how to do it correctly. And that is the theme of today's video. Hello everybody, it is Tobias Murphy for Murphy Music Academy, and today, as I just said before the intro, we are going to go through all things shifting. I'm going to go through all of the little mechanics, all of the little finger motions and thumb stuff that you need to know to be able to have really beautiful, clean, clear, and consistently accurate shifts. I'm going to show you how to put all of those little movements together, exactly how to practice them. We are not going to leave anything on the table today. You are going to learn how to do shifting properly. Also, judging by the number of requests that I've gotten for this particular topic just in the past week alone, and also the number of times I've had to successfully, I might add, teach this topic, teach the subject to my own private students, and all of the, basically a lot of people were just thrown into, well, basically throwing their hand up and down the violin with no real idea exactly the technique to make shifting good. So if you find this video incredibly useful, or the rest of my videos incredibly useful, please like the video, comment on it, comment on something else you'd like me to cover, subscribe to the channel, and please share this video and my other videos with anyone else that needs technical help with the violin. Now back to shifting. Now I realize that I've kind of become the anti-shoulder rest guy. However, I want every violinist and violist possibly watching this to understand that even if you do use a shoulder rest, all of the techniques, all of the things I'm going to teach you in this video apply to you too. In fact, I have taught this numerous times to violinists who already use shoulder rest. My students that come to me from other teachers that use shoulder rest, I do not force them to not use a shoulder rest. However, if you try to learn how to shift properly without the aid of a shoulder rest, you will actually probably ingrain the technique that I'm going to teach you a little bit better. And when you go back to using your shoulder rest in normal playing, you'll be that much more secure. Now, there are a couple preliminary things we need to go over before you start to do any shifting practice or any learning of shifting at all. Now, the first thing I want to make sure that you understand you cannot do while learning to shift is to squeeze the fingers too hard on the strings. So it doesn't matter what thumb position you're doing. Go back and check out my thumb position video. If you're using this thumb position or this thumb position or this thumb position, you can squeeze with all of them, and it's all going to have the same result. Also, that sound you just heard, that's not an exaggeration. I hear that all the time. Whenever I get a student that comes in and the previous teacher didn't teach them how to, play with a lighter hand, and then I try to teach them how to shift and to do scales, I hear that you can hear it just over every single note, and it also makes them less accurate. Probably some of you sound like that. So one of the first things you're going to want to check before you start doing shifting practice is to see how light of pressure you can get away with and still have a clear sound. Now, one of the quickest ways for you to reduce the amount of pressure you are putting onto the fingerboard and onto the strings is to actually just change the angle of your fingers a little bit as they make contact with the string. So instead of going from if you're playing right on the tip of your finger, you want to go instead play somewhere between the tip of the finger right here and the pad of the finger. So somewhere about right there. Now, for a visual of what it would look like to put your fingers on the tips as opposed to between the pad and the tip, this is the tips of the fingers, sort of putting like that. You can see how tight my hand is doing this. And then, of course, if I were to put my fingers down flat, this would be what it looked like to put the fingers right on the pad. So instead, I'm going to find a much more natural curve here that is between the tips and the pads. Now, this is going to reduce tension in your hand for two reasons. First off, this is just a much more natural curve to your fingers. Secondly, the closer you get to the pad, there's more flesh here. So as you put the finger down onto the string, all the way down to the fingerboard, by the time this finger reaches the fingerboard, the string is going to have dug up into the flesh a little bit more than if you're playing right on the tip, meaning you actually have less distance to travel to the fingerboard, meaning you don't actually have to squeeze as hard. Now, the other thing that we need to go over before you start doing any learning of shifting or shifting practice is to understand that no matter what tempo you are in, you want to perform the shifts as slowly as you can possibly get away with. Now, this is not to say that all of your shifts should be slow, but they should be as slow as possible within a given tempo. So let's say you're playing, a scale, 16th notes, 120 beats per minute. All of your shifts need to be as slow as you can get away with within that tempo. So they'll actually still be pretty fast, but you want them to be as slow as possible within that tempo. Now, the biggest reason that you need to make sure you never try to do a shift any faster than the slowest tempo you can possibly get away with is that you need to be consciously aware. Your ear has to be consciously aware of every part of the shift, from the beginning of the shift at the bass note to the landing note, because the ear is going to send the signal to your thumb, which acts as the brake to stop the hand. So you start here with normal pressure, but light pressure, normal pressure, but light pressure. As you shift up, you reduce the pressure of your fingers even more, and then as your ear hears you get close to the top note, it needs to learn to put on the brake. And if you do not actively and consciously decide to go as slowly as possible within a given tempo on a shift, you are just not going to be as aware of everything that is happening from the bottom of the shift to the top of the shift. Now, with all of that preliminary stuff out of the way, remember finger pressure, finger angle, and go as slowly as you can. We are going to get into the actual steps of learning how to shift properly, going upwards. And before we start doing this, though, I really want to make sure that you follow these directions, these steps, exactly as I lay them out. You have no idea how many times I give exact steps for people to follow, and they don't follow them. They think they can just skip through them all, or maybe do a few at the same time, and it doesn't work. And then we have to backtrack. We have to spend 10 extra minutes on every lesson to have them go back and do the steps exactly, so then they can then successfully do the technique. Oh, whew. Okay, sorry about that. All right, anyway, so the first motion that you're going to want to master when you start doing shifting is and I'm speaking specifically of shifting from first position to either third or fourth position. We're just going to first start out going first to third. So you want to make sure that the motion is coming from here and that you're not doing anything with your wrist. You'll see a lot of people do this kind of stuff with their shifting. We just want to get this nice motion in our fingers. It doesn't matter what thumb position you use. Just make sure that you are not doing any kind of snaking motion like this up with your wrist and just moving from the elbow joint. Now, once you get yourself comfortable with this motion, which honestly should take all about maybe 10 seconds or so, now we want to start using that motion to measure out the difference between the bottom note and the landing note, which will usually be the same finger and will usually be the first finger. So I'm going to do this on the A string, and I'm going to go from first position to third position, and it's going to be from B natural to D natural. So you're going to have your bow, and what you want to do is play very nice, smooth, lugubrious slides back and forth. So we're going to find the B, there it is, and we're going to slide up to the D, and if I squeeze too hard, then it's going to be easy for me to drag my arm forward while my hand stays back here. We want to make sure we're just putting the finger down enough, about at that angle maybe, so it's not squeezing too hard, like I said in the first part of this video, and you can easily and smoothly and with the same speed going up, no sudden jerks or anything like that, go as slowly as you can possibly get away with within the tempo you are playing. So we're going to go like this, and then practice going back down. And it's okay to do vibrato, it'll keep your hand nice and loose. Now, while there are going to be times when you're going to shift from one finger to a third up on the same finger, most of the time, especially if we're doing things like scales, which, the building blocks of all pieces, we're going to have to put a finger in between the bass finger and the landing finger. Now, this is where your thumb especially becomes involved. Not just to keep the fingers from pinching too hard, but the thumb also is going to help you sort of replace, so I'm going to go 1, 2, and then 1. The thumb is going to help me replace the second finger with the first finger, so there's not this weird extra noise. It'll be an easy, nice, smooth transition from 1, 2 to 1. So the mechanics of this particular technique, let me put my bow down here, let's see if you can see my fingers very clearly here, is that I'm going to almost, using my thumb under here, I'm going to push use my first finger to sort of get underneath the second finger and kind of push it out of the way. So without even moving my hand up, before I even do this motion here, I want to start, once my second finger is played, I play first finger, play second finger, and then while second finger is being played, I train my first finger to come up underneath it. And at this point, I can then start engaging this motion, the motion we did doing here. So I can go 1, 2, and then it easily just pushes it out of the way. And so the thumb actually has to be part of that, because the thumb, anchors the hand to the first position, and then it regulates how much pressure, how much squeezing you're doing, and so it can allow you, against your thumb, you can move the fingers. So this is how this will work. This is how you should practice it. So you go 1, and then play 2. And while you're playing 2, slide up 1 without sliding up 2. Thumb will stay in the same place, so just practice being able to do this. So 1, 2, and then you're going to complete the rest of that sliding motion. Pretty simple, right? And that is essentially all there is to shifting upwards in, let's say, from first to fifth position. So that would be roughly 2 shifts going 1, 2, shift, 1, 2, shift. So when you start practicing this, I know I kind of spazzed out about this before, but please, for the first few months at least that you start putting this into your scales, please follow these steps exactly. Do not think you can start combining them. Do not think you can start just going through them and that you'll just have it. You won't. Trust me. 99% of you will not do this correctly if you do not follow these steps exactly. So when you're playing, let's say, a B-flat major scale and you get to this point, so when you get to that first shift on the A string, you want to think to yourself, move the second finger and then move the whole rest of the hand. Every single time. Every single time. And you can still learn how to think through those steps pretty quickly, so you don't actually have to go that slow while you're playing it. But please make sure you do not skip steps. You will thank me when you do. Eventually, once you do this for, let's say, you practice this way for 6 months, it'll eventually just be part of your hand. But until that point, do not skip steps. Always go through the steps in your head. Now, as for shifting beyond fifth position, the technique is relatively the same, and I am speaking of going up, not downward shifting. Downward shifting is for the next video. But you are going to be doing the same thing with your first finger going underneath your second finger, moving into the next position. The difference between going from first to fifth position and from fifth position onward is that instead the instigation of the shifting motion is not going to come from your elbow, but instead going to come from your hand. This is because for most people, by the time you hit seventh position, your thumb is stuck here. Really can't go any higher. So you're going to, instead of moving this way, you're going to have to move this way. So your thumb's going to become the anchor and everything is going to move around the palm of your hand. So here are the steps. So let me find a seventh position. I'm going to stay in the B-flat major scale, so I think that'll be E-flat. So there I am in seventh position, and I want now to go to ninth position. So I'm still going to go 1 to 1. I'm going to measure the distance out between E-flat and G natural. So now I'm just going to push from here, though. And go nice, slowly, and smoothly. And again, much flatter finger here. Don't get on the tip of the finger. So now I'm going to do the same thing as I did down here. So then I'm going to play F natural. Then I'm going to stick the first finger right up underneath the F natural, the second finger, so, but not too much so it knocks it out of tune, but just enough so it's right underneath there, ready to go. And then push up into ninth position. And basically, you keep doing that until you reach the top of the fingerboard. Now, I know some of you are thinking, you're saying, Tobias, I have these tiny little hands. If I keep my thumb, I can't reach all the way up the fingerboard. I don't have your giant, manly hands that you use to play the violin with. What do I do? What do I do with my tiny hands? And it doesn't really matter. It doesn't, no. if you have giant fat hands, you can learn to play the violin just as well as someone with tiny little hands can learn to play the violin really well. You just are going to run into different challenges. So if you have small hands, here's my tip for you. This is the only time, I know I'm the anti-shoulder rest guy and say you should always hold the violin in your hand. This is the only time where you're going to allow yourself to hold the violin with your neck and shoulder. Now, I still don't advocate squeezing like this. I still think you can do this without a shoulder rest, but one of the things you can do is actually just allow the violin to kind of sit on your shoulder a little bit. Now, I use a pad. Some people think that's cheating, but I do stick a towel under my shirt. I am not against pads. I would like to learn, and I do practice scales with nothing at all. But, when I switched over from a shoulder rest, I played with a pad because that was the easiest way to switch over. And, that's what I'm used to now. So, what I would suggest, and as you see, I have nothing here right now, and I can do this without a pad. It's just much more comfortable for me to do it with a pad. If you are going to go into a super high position where you can't really reach or really play, a normal scale without your thumb leaving this spot right here, then just allow the violin to rest here. Actually, let it rest on your shoulder here, like this. It's really not going to dampen the sound that much. And then bring your thumb up here. Or for some people, they'll bring it here. I have some of my female students who have really small hands. If they want to get that same kind of pulling motion, they will just attach their thumb here instead of here. So, for example, let's say for me, a piece that I might have to leave my thumb and actually bring it up here, and I'll just kind of push up against here so the violin doesn't fall over here this way, is Le Rondé de l'Automne by Bazzini. So there's a section that goes... So anyway, what I would have to do is I just have to find my way up here, push myself up against this, so the violin is kind of still being supported. I'll bring my shoulder forward just a tiny bit, not enough to where it's going to cause any major problems, because typically you don't spend a lot of time up there, so raising your shoulder a little bit to play up there for a brief moment that you're going to play in a piece is not going to hurt you. And then just let go of your thumb here, find a way to get your thumb from here to here. And then it's actually not that hard to be able to get it back. So you just have to get used to letting go of the thumb here, finding a place where you can kind of support it on your shoulder, kind of support it on your thumb, find another place for your thumb. For some people, that is the shoulder of the violin here. Sometimes when I have to play up really high, I'll just stick my thumb right up here. And that is how you play with smaller hands, or that is how you play in the super high positions on the rare occasions that you do have to play up there. Shifting part 2. Let's talk about downward shifting. Now, first off, just like when doing upward shifting, when we are doing downward shifting, we kind of split the shifting into 2 sectors. So in upward shifting, it's sort of from first position to fifth position. The technique is a little bit different once you get past fifth position. So we've got the arm movement that gets us from first position to fifth position, and then the thumb is stuck here, and we're mostly moving from the thumb to get up to the higher positions. Now, of course, it is similar in shifting downwards. The main difference, however, between shifting downwards and shifting upwards, besides the fact that, most people are afraid if they don't use the shoulder rest, they're going to pull the violin away from their neck. The main difference is that instead of doing 1-2, 1-2, you're mostly doing 3-2-1, 3-2-1. Maybe it's a lack of comfort or the general insecurity of doing downward shifts, but for whatever reason, as violinists, we want to cover as much ground as possible in as short a period of time when we are shifting downwards. Now, to start learning the technique, we're going to start with everything you do above fifth position. Now, for shifting down, this time I'm actually going to use the D major scale instead of the B flat major scale, which I used in the first video on upward shifting. This way you get a clearer view of what it's like to shift downwards with your thumb still stuck up on this part of the violin. So using standard violin scale fingering, at the top of a D major scale, your first finger is going to be on a G natural in ninth position. So how do we get from here to an F sharp here on our third finger? Because unlike going up where we go 1 to 1, we now have to go from 1 to 3. So it's going to be a little bit similar to how we did going up, where we stuck the first finger underneath the second finger and then used the rest of the motion to push the finger out of the way. Now, obviously, I can't stick my third finger underneath my first finger, but there is something that we can do that comes pretty close to it. So instead of trying to get the finger underneath the finger that is in our way, as we did in upward shifting, we are now going to try to get it as close to it as possible. So you can even try to see if you can stick your third finger right on top of the nail of your first finger. Now, when you actually perform the shift, don't try to do this. This will make your first finger flat. We don't want to have any of our notes flat. But what you do want to do is see if you can get it as close as possible, just kind of hovering over maybe a half step above it. Now, once you are ready to shift and your first finger is here on its note and the third finger is right above it, ready to pounce down and play the note right below it, what you're now going to do is engage the thumb here and pull the hand down like so. Now, the difference between this and upward shifting is that in upward shifting, we actually gauged the space between each position. Here, you're not actually going to put your first finger all the way down into sixth position, because then you would hear this awful giant slide when you perform the shift. Instead, you're going to get, this is why you want to get that third finger as close to the first finger as possible, because you're just going to go down maybe one note or so below the landing note. So the landing note here is an F sharp. I'm going to try to aim to get my first finger down to something between an F natural and an E natural. So to demonstrate this in very slow motion, here is my starting note, a G natural. And then I'm going to pull down with my thumb and bring it down maybe to probably a flat F natural. There you go, flat F natural. And then my third finger, which is right above it, is just gonna slam down right there and replace the note. So in slow motion, this is what a proper downward shift looks like. And I'm in sixth position. Now I just have to rely on my knowledge of hand frame to make sure my second and first fingers get right to their places. The only thing left to do now is to add a little bit of magic fairy dust in the form of loosening up the pressure on the string at the exact right time during the shift down, so we no longer hear that slide. So, or at least barely hear it. And that about covers all of downward shifting from here to here. Which then leads us to, honestly, the most difficult part of downward shifting, which is how do I get from here to here? Now, this is the point in which most people that want to play violin without a shoulder rest, want to learn, they get a little bit scared because they think, if I shift from here to here, how am I going to stop myself from ripping the violin off the shoulder, suffering some tragic violin accident, casting the violin out into the audience? It hits some old lady in the face, and that would just be really bad for the violin. Well, it's a good thing I'm here to tell you how to avoid this terrible fate. Now, just like in upward shifting, the main difference between shifting from here and shifting through here is the initiation of the motion. Up here, it's all around the thumb of the hand, and here, it is all around the elbow. So I'm going to take the most extreme example of the shift so you can understand how it can be done. It's not always going to be this big of a shift, but if you know how to do this one, then you're going to know how to do all of the rest. So I've decided to choose a G major scale for this particular demonstration because this puts my first finger on the C natural in fifth position, which means I now want to shift. I want to make, because downward shifts, you want to cover as much ground as humanly possible while still being clean. I'm going to shoot my hand into first position on a fourth finger. The technique for doing this particular shift is similar to the technique we used up here. The difference, of course, besides just pulling from here, is that we can't really get the fourth finger that close to the first finger, and also we kind of have a lot farther to travel to get from here to here, and also we no longer have the brace of the violin up here. So we are going to now practice using even less finger pressure as possible, and we are also going to break my previous rule from the other video on shifting of making sure our shifts are as slow as we can possibly get away with. A breakdown of these steps is as follows. So I have my bass finger, which is my first finger here, on a C natural. I have my landing finger, which is the fourth finger, and as soon as I'm about to shift, my fourth finger gets close to that first finger, and then right as soon as I'm done playing this full sound of this note, I let it up almost completely. Now it doesn't come off the string, but it does basically what I call ghosting the string. So it is just lying barely on top of there. There's no pressure. It's less than harmonic level pressure. And then the only friction now between my hand and the neck of the violin is just whatever weight the violin is putting on my thumb. And the great thing about this is that the friction that naturally happens when the violin weight is placed on the thumb can easily be counteracted by the friction that is on your chin on the chin rest. So I don't actually have to squeeze down. I just have to basically be touching the chin with the chin rest, and that's all that's going to happen. That's all that's going to move, and you should just get used to the violin moving like that. So I'm going to play the note. My fourth finger is going to get close to my first finger. Right as soon as I shift, I'm going to let up all pressure here and then shoot my hand down here. And as soon as it has room, my fourth finger is going to slap itself into place, and voila, I'm in first position. So, for a slow motion breakdown, now, if you perform the shift too slowly, you are going to hear that slide. You can't really hide that big of a slide, but it is a good idea when you are first starting out putting this into scales. You want to practice actually going and hearing that slide just so you get the feel of the technique. And then once you're comfortable with that, then try and speed it up to where you are fast enough and light enough on your fingers to where you don't really hear that slide. Now, of course, I picked the most extreme version, basically jumping from 5th position to 1st position. However, you still use the same type of technique in a lot of other shifts that are a little bit less extreme, that often go still 1 to 3 instead of 1 to 4. So another example of this would be if you were shifting from, let's say, 6th position to 3rd position. So one would be on D, and I want to get to 3rd position, which would be, let's say, a C sharp. I'm still going to have to now travel with my arm instead of with my hands. So that kind of letting go, moving the hand down, trusting the friction here and the friction here, and then slapping my 3rd finger into place. All of the same technique rules apply. I'm just in a slightly higher position and using different fingers. Anyway, that is it for shifting both upwards and downwards. And please, oh please, if you follow all of my directions, all of my steps exactly as I lay them out, you will be successful in your shifting and you won't have to relearn all this stuff later. And that's always nice. So if you liked the video, then put a like on the video. If you have a question, then put it down below, and I do answer my comments. If you have suggestions for another violin technique that you'd like me to cover and turn into a future video, then please put it down there, and I will do my best to turn it into another one of these incredibly detailed, useful, helpful violin technique videos. Anyway, I have been Tobias Murphy for Murphy Music Academy, where there is no pleasure in mediocrity. Don't forget to subscribe on your way out, and I'll see you next time.